Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll discuss the 2024 election. But first, we're joined by Chris Bork, Director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Oh, thanks, Francine.
We're about to review results from your final Muhlenberg College poll taken before the general election. Did anything stand out to you?
You know, what stands out is the overarching result that this is a very, very close race. We're accustomed to that in Pennsylvania. Our last poll shows that. Almost every other poll I've seen in the last few days is in a similar position, few points difference. You could understand why Pennsylvania is as hard campaigned for as we're seeing right now. Big state, key electoral votes, and a really tight race.
Let's start out by looking at favorability ratings for the two major party presidential candidates. Kamala Harris is rated as 49% favorable, 46% unfavorable. Donald Trump at 42% favorable, 54% unfavorable. Are you able to determine whether voters are more motivated to vote for somebody because they like them versus voting against a candidate that they dislike?
Yeah, it's a great question. Earlier this year, we saw when President Biden was on the ticket, the high unfavorables for both candidates made that key group that we said the double haters very interested. That has transformed a little bit with the Vice President Harris on. Her approval ratings for favorability ratings are a little higher than President Biden's were. So it complicates the mix a little bit. But ultimately, there still is a group there, not as big, of people that not all enamored with either candidates are going to have to make a choice. And that's a fun group to look at.
Let's look at the presidential race matchup now. Harris comes in at 49%, Donald Trump at 47%, not sure 2%, and other 2%. What role will the undecided and perhaps third party or independent voters have in determining who the next president is?
Yeah, they're a small but mighty group right now, Francine. Very low percentage in terms of historically as we're looking at this race. But as I said earlier, given the nature of the tight race that we're seeing, incredibly close, at least according to the polls, and our history tells us how close Pennsylvania can be, that this group can be decisive or determinative. If they break one way at the end, and we've seen that historically in 2016 and 2020, some late breakers really affected, especially in 2016, helping Donald Trump, I think, to his very narrow victory in Pennsylvania. We'll see where these folks go in terms of their break and if they show up again. This is often these undecideds, as voters are less likely to show up. We see that in our polling, and just how many of them will be in the mix and where they break in a very close race could be very important.
Let's shift our focus now to the U.S. Senate race. First, let's look at favorability ratings for those candidates. Bob Casey, the incumbent, received 40% favorable ratings, 40% unfavorable. Is that what you'd expect for an incumbent who served in the U.S. Senate since 2007? Yeah,
it's interesting. Of course, Senator Casey's been a presence in Pennsylvania politics for a long time, even before the Senate, with state offices, and his father, of course, being governor, iconic figure in Pennsylvania. And it's divided. He's been in the midst of an extremely negative campaign this fall with millions of dollars of ads being targeted at him, millions of dollars of ads being targeted at his opponent, Dave McCormick. And I think it's taken a toll on favorability, on his favorability, on McCormick's favorability. And compared to our last poll, which was in September, actually, we see McCormick's numbers suffering a little bit more. It's a really tight race, just like the presidential race. We're talking a few points, but certainly over the course of the race, Senator Casey's favorability, I think, has taken a hit.
Let's look at those numbers once again now for Republican candidate Dave McCormick. He received 30% favorable ratings, 45% unfavorable. Now, 2 years ago in the U.S. Senate race, the issue of residency was problematic for the Republican U.S. Senate candidate Mehmet Oz. Is Dave McCormick doing enough to avoid similar criticisms?
I think he's worked hard both in his previous campaign, primary campaign in 2022 and this year to establish his bona fides, if you will, as a Pennsylvanian. He grew up here, spent time, went to high school here, has lived here, has worked here. He has less of a tangential relationship as Mehmet Oz did 2 years ago. Nonetheless, it's a primary focus of the ads that we see running against him. Connecticut Dave, talking about his mansion there and flying back to Connecticut. We'll see what kind of toll eventually it takes, if it does, on his campaign. But certainly he's being targeted on that issue.
Let's look at this U.S. Senate race matchup now. Casey comes in at 49%, McCormick at 46%. Other receives 3%, and not sure is 1%. How does this compare to how this race has tracked over the past several months?
It's gotten closer. Our polls and other polls have shown from the spring onward that McCormick has made some inroads, tightening the race. Just notably, that'll be the tightest race that Senator Casey has ever had, win or lose. Of course, he's won going away in his three previous elections. And McCormick has been the type of candidate that I think is a tougher matchup for Casey. And we see those poll numbers extremely close. 49%, that number is important. That's for an incumbent. We usually track pretty closely to the final numbers that they get. If he can't crack 50 in this race, obviously that opens the door for a very close race, or perhaps even McCormick nudging ahead at the end.
Do you anticipate that the presidential race will have a coattail effect on this and other down ticket races on Pennsylvania's ballot?
Yeah, we've been talking about that in my elections class this year. It's hard. We think coattails, right? When somebody's got a decent lead or running away with a race, that they pull them along by the coattails. We don't see that in the presidential race, with it being so thin of a margin between the two candidates. But that doesn't mean it won't be impactful, right? If again, let's say Harris or Trump wins by a couple of points, they bring in a little bit of a different audience at the end. Could it affect a very tight race like we see in the Senate race? Yeah, and that's the thing. The word I've overused this fall by far is margin. These margins that we're looking at are so thin, and marginal impacts, therefore, could be really impactful in terms of the outcome.
Let's look at one more set of poll data, and this is perceived threats to the election. 28% perceive voter fraud, 20% suppression of the vote, 18% foreign interference, and 11% use of mail-in ballots. What do these results tell you about the mindset of voters going into this election?
Yeah, Francine, we've asked this question way back into 2020. I wanted to see how it's changed, and it has changed. Things like fraud certainly have been elevated over time as messaging on fraud has become more common in terms of candidates' communications on this matter. But you do see the diversity, and we break that out often by party. And you could see, for example, Democrats much more concerned about voter suppression efforts, foreign interference. Republicans more concerned about fraud or mail ballots in terms of their major concerns. So, as is so common in American politics right now, our polarized views emerge where we see threats that might undermine democracy, and that's playing out in Pennsylvania.
Now, tomorrow's election day. Once all of the results are in, what will you do to review and analyze what happened at the polls?
Yeah, it's one of the great things. First of all, just as a political scientist that studies the state, really diving deep into the data on the small levels, even the precinct levels. Now, that won't come till probably a little bit later. We'll try to match up results with our polling to see how our modeling was, how our turnout estimates performed, and then take on lots and lots. One of the wonderful things about elections, other than the purity, the sanctity of a democratic system, is that they produce an abundant amount of data that we can try to understand. And my students and myself and the Institute will have lots to work with starting tomorrow.
Chris Bork, thank you for joining us once again.
It's my pleasure, Nancy.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break. Welcome back. Our guests today are Lawrence Tabas, chair of the Pennsylvania State Republican Party, and Senator Sharif Street, chair of the Pennsylvania State Democratic Party. Pennsylvania has been in the national spotlight over the last several weeks in particular. Senator Street, we'll start with you. What has been your party's strategy in these final weeks?
Well, look, we wanted to engage voters where they are, talk about issues that matter to people, and making sure that folks understand that that a woman's right to choose is on the ballot, and we want to make sure that folks know that Kamala Harris and Democrats are standing behind that. Understand that her economic policies around making sure that she wants to build 3 million new homes, and that there's 25, and that she's going to have $25,000 grants for folks who want to get first-time homeowners. And we've also been talking about doing an incredible ground game. We've knocked over 2 million doors with state partying with our partners in organized labor. The number goes up to 10 million doors knocked, sent out, recruited over 60,000 volunteers, and had lots of people engaging people in neighborhoods where they are, from barbershops to beauty salons to churches. We've just been engaging people where they are, talking about the vice president's message and the Democrats' message up and down the ballot in order to get folks engaged and involved and making sure people understand the importance of this election.
Lawrence Tabas, what has your party strategy been in these final days coming up to Election Day?
Well, we too have invested a great deal in our ground game and our get out the vote. When I was first elected 5 years ago, the Democrats had a voter registration advantage of about 815,000. We've reduced that by over 525,000, the lowest it's been in 52 years. This year alone, 100,000 new Republican registrations since the primary. We've really ramped up the mail-in ballot program and strategy. We are doing excellent there. Our applications are up. Our return rate is fantastic. We have cut the Democrats' advantage in half on the mail-in ballot. And we really engaged actively with the early in-person voting throughout the Commonwealth. The counties, there were long lines. In Bucks County, they had to extend it for a couple of days because people wanted to get out, and we got our voters out to vote early. That's been the focal point, and we're going to continue that. We're not taking anything for granted right up through Election Day.
How do you determine if there are particular demographics or regions of the state that you really want to target to voters?
Well, we're actually going out after everybody because there are really two fundamental differences between the Republicans and the Democrats in this election. And the key one is that the Biden-Harris policies have really made all Americans, all Pennsylvanians are struggling. The average family cost of living is up by about $13,000 on an annual basis. All prices for food, utilities, gas, insurance, they're way through the roof. Wages are not keeping up with inflation. The Biden-Harris American Rescue Plan ended up rescuing no one. And at the same time, our border is not secure. Millions of unknown illegal people are coming across the border, creating havoc, potential crime, which leads to unsafe communities and neighborhoods. And these are issues that are critical to every American, including the national security. So we're going after every single voter. We believe every voter will find our policies will be much better than they've been these past 4 years under Biden-Harris.
Senator Street, similar question to you. How do you determine who the undecideds are, who you're focusing your efforts on?
Look, we're also going after everybody, but we'll contrast that under Donald Trump, we had a terrible economy. The economy was failing. Donald Trump told us to drink bleach as opposed to getting us out of COVID, where Biden-Harris got folks, millions of people vaccinated. We're talking to people because people are offended by the comments that Donald Trump has made around saying that Haitian immigrants want to eat people's cats and dogs, talking about the fact that he talked about Puerto Rico as an island of garbage. He's talked about his willingness and his right to sexually assault women. These are all things that we think are disturbing to everyone. But beyond that, we know that Donald Trump is the first president to lose millions of jobs during his tenure, while 16 million jobs have been created during the Biden-Harris administration. And moreover, Kamala Harris understands it's time to turn the page and move forward with a new generation of leadership. She's talking about the need to create more affordable housing. She's talking about the need to get illegal guns off our streets. And she has done something about the opioid crisis by taking on big opioid companies and making sure that she returns money to Americans. When she was Attorney General of California, she's continued with that, while Donald Trump scapegoats immigrants and pretends somehow that the crime problems in Pennsylvania are attributed to immigrants, when we know that it's the massive amount of illegal guns, it's the American companies that have produced opioids that have affected our communities that are happening. And finally, while there is a need for immigration reform in America, it's not really impacting Pennsylvanians as much. Kamala Harris, working with President Biden, came up with a bipartisan bill. What did Donald Trump do? He blocked the bipartisan solution. The bill that had conservatives and more moderate folks working on the bill because Donald Trump only cared about his own reelection. Donald Trump's running a campaign for grievances, talking about how a revenge list. Kamala Harris has a list of things she's got to do for the American people. We're reminding folks of that.
Let's talk briefly about voter registration. The Department of State reports that almost 76,000 people have left the two major political parties this year and registered as independents or third-party voters. Why do you suspect that's happening?
I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, I was just. No, go ahead. You can go. I'll interrupt.
I think it's, as politics have gone forward, I think people are coming up and having and sharing different views. But I think the key here is that in our party, we've been able to substantially reduce the deficit that we had with the Democratic Party over these many years. We are bringing new voters in. 70,000 Democrats switched to the Republican Party this year. And again, as I said earlier, 100,000 have registered in our party since the primary. So yes, the independents are picking up more registrations, but we see that our party's registration base has increased substantially.
Look, I would just say that the Democratic Party is competitive in every county and every place. The Republican Party in the city of Philadelphia has dropped to third-party status. As in our local government, the Working Families Party, which is to the left of the Democratic Party, has actually picked up more seats in council and now controls the minority position in Philadelphia city government. I think there's some misconception in those numbers because those folks on national and statewide elections will vote for Democrats, even though they are moving to independent because they're actually left of our party. As we've absorbed disaffected Republicans who have left the Republican Party to become Democrats, there are some folks on the far left that decided the Democratic Party is too moderate, too centrist. And so in places like Philadelphia and Allegheny to a lesser extent, people have moved out of our party to the left. That won't impact this election. Those folks are still going to vote for Bob Casey. They're still going to vote for Kamala Harris. They're still going to vote for Democrats statewide. But at local elections, they are electing people to the left of the Democratic Party. And that's a phenomenon that hasn't been talked about. But the reality is in Pennsylvania's largest county, Republicans have now moved in local government to third-party status, which is something I didn't think I'd see, but it is a reality.
According to the Department of State, over 9 million Pennsylvanians are registered to vote. There are over 1.4 million independent or third-party voters. Is there any way to predict how those independent or third-party voters will lean at the polls?
I mean, look, we reach out to them. We've had our ground game on top of them. But, I do have to get back to that issue that Senator Street raised. I mean, it's outrageous for him to say that Kamala Harris has done a lot to stem the opioid crisis. The very fact that Joe Biden made her the border czar and she did nothing in that job. The opioid is coming in and the fentanyl are coming into this nation through those borders. And in Pennsylvania, right now, 79% increase in opioid deaths in our state. So quite frankly, I think that is something that she has completely failed on. And that's why we need a secure border, which President Trump and the Republican administration will bring us.
Donald Trump gave us nothing but lies. Mr. Tabas knows it. Kamala Harris, I'm not saying this. A U.S. federal court said it when Kamala Harris took the big opioid companies to court. She took them to court and she got a settlement for over $20 billion for California. There have been opioid settlement dollars that flowed in there. Josh Shapiro, as Attorney General, joined her in this. One company was proved to have produced over $900 million extra doses of fentanyl. That's where the opioids are coming on, not immigrants in backpacks. And certainly they're not walking it hundreds of miles up here. We have an opioid crisis, yes. But the opioid crisis is because there are two reasons. One, because Donald Trump's fat cat corporate folks decided to put profit over people and make money. The same people that Donald Trump gave tax cuts, the same people that Dave McCormick invested in, those are the people who created this crisis. And the reality is that Kamala Harris did work with President Biden to get a bipartisan border bill. And what did Donald Trump do? He said he wanted the issue for a political issue more than he cared about people. So if you believe, if you believe the Republican Party, and if you believe that what my colleague is saying, that it's coming through the border, then Donald Trump is responsible for killing the bipartisan bill. But the reality is we know much of it is actually being produced by American companies, and it's the greed that Bob Casey talks about all the time that's driving this. And that's why we've got to have real leadership, not people who are going to be in the pockets of the corporate elite.
Senator Street, a few moments ago, you had mentioned the issue of abortion as one of the top issues in this race. The Dobbs decision 2 years ago was credited with helping Democrats at the polls. Do you think that holds as much significance this year as it did 2 years ago?
Absolutely. I mean, Donald Trump's bragged as women die, needing not only abortions, but all other kinds of women's health care procedures like DNCs, where a fetus has died inside of a woman and she needs it to remove so that she can have children in the future and her own life can be protected. States across this country, following Donald Trump's lead, passed vicious bans on women's health care that not only ban abortions, but ban procedures like DNCs. I watched a woman stand there and talk about how she laid in a hospital until she had to become septic before they would perform a procedure, because there are laws in Republican-controlled states that wouldn't allow doctors to proceed without criminal penalty. Donald Trump talks about he wants punishment. We've seen what it happens around in other places, and we don't want that to happen in Pennsylvania. So it's absolutely an issue. It's an issue because women should have the right to choose, and it's an issue because the so-called abortion bans have not just banned abortion, but have banned many other procedures. And it is horrible what's happening. And Donald Trump laughs at it and says he's proud of it. I'm ashamed of him for it.
Lawrence Tabas, do you want to talk a little bit about the Republican Party position on abortion and the significance in this race?
Yes, the Democrats, since the Dobbs decision, have absolutely falsely characterized our views on it. The president in our platform has made it clear.
I think we're having some technical difficulties. Let's move on with our discussion, and we'll go back with Mr. Tabas's response in just a moment until we get that signal cleared up. Senator Street, talk about how much you're working with the national party, particularly in the presidential race.
Well, look, I say Chairman Harris and the DNC have been great. They've worked with us in terms of coordinating what Harris and Walz are doing, coordinating with Casey, making sure that the DCCC works with us. And they have not ignored the down ballot races. So look, they've been great partners, and it is that kind of collective effort that are helping us, are going to help us get the ground game going and make sure we get our voters to the polls to win this election.
Lawrence Tabas, let's try back again with you once again. I believe we were interrupted. Your signal froze for just a moment when you were talking a little bit about the significance of the role of abortion in this race.
Right, thank you. But the key thing here is that the Democrats have ignored women's rights when it comes to women being forced to compete with biological males in sports, when they've been forced to share locker rooms and restrooms with biological males, and with the fact that they are not supporting a mother's rights to be involved heavily in their children's education. So we feel that right now, those are important issues that are facing American women and our nation as a whole. And we believe that the Republican and the Donald Trump policies have moved forward to protect women's rights in all of those areas.
Look, I just got to jump in. The issue about transgenders is, of course, there have been exactly 4 people in the country who have who've tried to involve, and in no place the NCAA has embraced people who are still pre-op males participating in women's sports. That's the first thing. Second thing, I just got to say, look, Donald Trump has assaulted more women than there have been women who participated in those sports. That is a bigger issue. But beyond that, the suggestion that the Republicans and Donald Trump have stood up for women's rights, they have stripped away women's rights to have procedures that will literally let women die. There have been 4 women who've already died. And the Project 2025, which Donald Trump denounces, but J.D. Vance actually says is an active part of it. His name is on portions of the document. And Donald Trump, after it was published, picked him for vice president. That document, which is written by the Trump transition folks, that document suggests that there would be a national abortion ban. And we looked at and we have a very good picture of what a national abortion ban look only to the southern states where it's already happened and where women are dying. We don't want that to happen in Pennsylvania. Their policies have rejected women's rights across the board and continue to do so.
Lawrence Tabas, what should viewers know about Project 2025?
There's absolutely no support for that by President Trump or the Republicans. And the Democrats know that. They're using it to distract the voters from the fact that the Biden-Harris policies have absolutely failed. I outlined where they did on the economy. Look at national security, Afghanistan, and the cut and run that went there. The fact that there was no wars under President Trump. Russia did not invade any countries. Iran had been virtually made almost bankrupt. China was checked. These are the policies that the Biden-Harris administration reversed and made our nation less secure, our economy less secure, our border less secure, and just our safety in our own communities. And instead, the Democratic strategy has been to vilify and demean Republicans and voters that are supporting our issues. And it's dividing us as a nation. And it is not a strategy that is necessary and helpful to restoring what we need to do. Look, Americans had much better view of the President Trump's policies than they did these last 4 years. It is clear Pennsylvanians and Americans are not better off than they were 4 years ago, and they are going to turn the page on the Democrats on tomorrow's election.
Well, listen, they're denouncing Project 2025, but J.D. Vance is actually a part of it. They're denouncing it, but the Donald Trump's transition staff are a part of it. Look, Donald Trump lies over and over again, and this is just another example of his lies. And Mr. Tabas may believe Donald Trump's lies, but I certainly don't, and I think most Americans don't. Additionally, let's point out the generals that worked for Donald Trump, General Milley, many other generals, they have overwhelmingly condemned him and said he is a clear and present danger to America. They've talked about him being a useful idiot to Putin. They've talked about his sick suggestion that he admires Hitler's generals. These are things that Republicans have condemned. Republicans that worked for Donald Trump that know him quite well. This is not a Democratic or Republican issue. Dick Cheney was a proud Republican and served as vice president. There's a reason he's endorsed Kamala Harris. Liz Cheney was a member of Congress. I can continue. There are over 350 Republican elected officials, many who served at the highest levels of government, who condemned Donald Trump. Kamala Harris is the one bringing the country together. There are not prominent Democrats endorsing. There are no Democratic vice presidents endorsing Donald Trump, but Republicans are endorsing Kamala Harris. Democrats are endorsing Kamala Harris. Independents are, because folks understand that Donald Trump's divisions of this country are unconscionable. Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Rights Act and attempted to bring us together. George W. Bush, after 9/11, brought us together. Republicans and Democratic presidents can bring us together. John Kennedy did it. But Donald Trump has been the worst divisive president in the history, and he has vilified Americans like no one else. Donald Trump is the one saying that Haitian immigrants eat cats and dogs. Donald Trump is the one saying that Mexicans are rapists and robbers. Donald Trump is the one talking about sexually assaulting women. And there are Republicans and Democrats, including Vice President Dick Cheney, who've condemned Donald Trump's bigoted remarks. And Kamala Harris will bring us together. She's already promised a bipartisan cabinet, and she's going to work to make sure people can have housing, to make sure that the Affordable Care Act, where 700,000 additional Pennsylvanians are receiving care, can continue, and make sure that regular people's lives are better. That's what the Democratic Party is doing, and that's what Kamala Harris is doing, because we've embraced the Republicans who stood up for country over party. and we're working together.
We're going to give our guests a brief break while we look at what's coming up on PCN. Tomorrow's the big day where Pennsylvanians cast their votes for President, U.S. Senate, Congress, and statewide races. On the issues is Chris Borg from Muhlenberg College for a preview of the 5 most competitive races in Congress tomorrow at 7 p.m. Then stay with PCN for live election night coverage. We'll have expert guests join us to provide an analysis of the poll numbers as they come in. We'll also provide live reports for you from the major party candidate headquarters for U.S. Senate and State Attorney General. That all gets started live tomorrow at 8:30. On the day after the election, we'll do a roundup of the results. Wes Leckrone, political science professor from Widener University, will tell us about the winners and the races that are too close to call. That's Wednesday at 7 p.m. Then we'll take a break from election coverage when On the Issues considers the topic of skills games. Mike Barley from Pace-O-Matic will be here to explain Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Journalists Roundtable will give us yet another perspective on the election with Katie Meyer from Spotlight PA, Harrison Kahn of City and State PA, and Pat Loeb of KYW News Radio in Philadelphia. They'll be here Thursday at 7 p.m. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free of charge on the internet. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers and donors like you to help achieve its mission. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Let's get back into our discussion. Once again, we're talking about election 2024. Now, at the very beginning of this program, I had an opportunity to talk with Chris Borg about the latest Muhlenberg College poll. One of the questions related to threats to Pennsylvania's election. 28% saw voter fraud as a potential threat, 20% suppression of the vote, 18% foreign interference, and 11% the use of mail-in ballots. What does that tell you about the mindset of voters going into this election?
I think from our perspective, it is the constantly changing rules, a lot of it being brought by Democrat litigation at the last minute. We have 67 counties, and it should be absolutely sacrosanct that the way an election is conducted and the way that ballots are counted is exactly the same, irrespective of what county you're from. The zip code should not matter. But that's not the way the rules are now. And the rules have been changing, and the Democrats have been going to court to seek a change in those rules. And that creates voter confusion and uncertainty. But look, we've been out there pushing the mail-in ballot, the early in-person voting, getting our peoples to the polls tomorrow. It is our fervent hope that this election will go smoothly, that the results will be absolutely accepted by everybody, and that we're able to move forward. You know, we're one nation, we're one people. We often disagree, as you can hear with Senator Street and me today. We have diametrically opposing views, but at the end of the day, we're all Americans, and that's what the key issue is here for us going forward.
Senator
Look,
Street?
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Pennsylvania's elections are safe and secure. It is unfortunate that people are questioning that, I think largely because of one American named Donald Trump, who consistently talks about the elections being unsecure. Look, Josh Shapiro, our governor, has appointed a Republican Secretary of State, Al Schmidt, who's served as a Republican elected official in the city of Philadelphia. There are, and the reality is both parties, but when there are exigent circumstances, will file motions asking for relief from the courts. The Republicans are actually filed for relief from the courts in Bucks County. We did not oppose that relief, which was granted extra days for folks to return mail-in ballots in person because of some irregularities that happened at one of the sites. So a lot of this litigation gets solved with us working together. And like I said, it's Republicans that in Bucks filed for a change of the rules, a rule change that made sense. We agreed to it. But the reality is overall elections are safe and secure. But Donald Trump in 2020, after he lost, did the unthinkable. He did what Al Gore, he couldn't do what Al Gore did when Al Gore accepted the results and congratulated George W. Bush. He couldn't do what Bob Dole did when he accepted the results and congratulated Bill Clinton. Look, the reality is that Donald Trump's the only president, Republican or Democrat, in modern history to not accept the results of election. And it is unfortunate because overwhelmingly, look, I've won elections and lost elections. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's part nature of politics. But we accept the results. You congratulate the winner. You move on. Republicans overwhelmingly do that. Democrats overwhelmingly do that. Donald Trump doesn't do it, and that's why so many Republicans and Democrats know he's unfit for office.
Listen, I have to say, Senator Street, there have been numerous instances, and what the point that I'm making is that the changing of the rules, the Democrat litigation going to court, when the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said
you guys went to court. You guys went to court in Bucks, and we agree with you because you were right. You went to court. You changed the rules just last week. The Supreme
Court in Pennsylvania made it absolutely clear that the outside envelope had to be dated. Even after that was done, the Democrats tried twice to change that rule, and the Supreme Court had to put them down on that. We went to court in Bucks County because the Bucks County voters who were waiting in line to cast
the right thing to
on the
do.
deadline, which expired at 5 o'clock, were told to go home before 5 o'clock.
And I agree with you.
That is not a change in the rule.
It wasn't changing the rules because we allowed people to continue to turn in their mail-in ballots for days they didn't. It was a change in the rules that you requested. I instructed our attorneys to agree with you because you did the right thing, but you asked for a change in the rules. That's all that I'm saying. Don't pretend like you don't ask for changes in the rules when you did it last week. Your lawyers went to court, not Donald Trump's lawyers, the lawyers for the Republican Party of Pennsylvania went to court, asked for a change, and you did the right thing. I commend you for it. I supported you in it, but you asked for to change the rules.
Look, the point that I'm making here, and I think is extremely important, is that there is no uniformity throughout our Commonwealth. It causes people to be confused and concerned. And again, even the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said changing the rules at the last minute is not appropriate and fair. And the fact of the matter is that we need to go forward with a set of consistent rules. Tell us what the rules are. Tell us that they apply in all 67 counties, and we'll be fine with that. And that's what I hope will happen on Election Day, and that we'll be able to move forward.
Look, Mr. Davis, I'll take this. Look, the reality is, I'm not going to pretend that you guys don't go to court to ask for change of rules. You did it. It was not anything. You didn't do anything wrong. You did something right. We agreed with you. The rules need to be changed in Bucks because of something that happened in Bucks. Overall, the rules are the same. What happens is there are circumstances that result in things that change from time to time. We agreed with you. You went to court, but it was your lawyers that petitioned the court for a change. It was a right change. You did the right thing, but you can't sit here and say that you don't ask for changes in circumstances because you do. And look, you're doing this because Donald Trump is pushing the party out there to say that there's all these problems. They're not. And the reality is the General Assembly should make the rules clearer. I worked with Chairman Argel when I chaired state government to try and get something done. Unfortunately, the divisions largely stoked by Donald Trump didn't allow us to get those votes to get that done. But there are many people. But the General Assembly should absolutely take up making our rules clearer going forward.
I'd like to shift our focus, just briefly talk about mail-in voting. Lawrence Tabas, does the Republican Party have a formal position on mail-in voting, and is there still mistrust over the security of it?
We absolutely are supporting it, and our strategy has been implemented, and I have President Trump is now supporting it emphatically. It's a legal means of voting in Pennsylvania. Look, Senator Street knows that it takes years actually to implement a fully functional mail-in ballot program in a state. Look at Colorado and Oregon and Washington, et cetera. But yes, we have been aggressively and assertively pursuing it, and the numbers show it. Our applications are way up over 2020. Our return rate is far higher. We've cut the Democrats' advantage on mail-in ballots in half. The Democrats' applications are down 700,000 from 2020. Their total return number by the end of the day will be down close to 700,000. We've moved forward on it. Our voters are now embracing it. We've been aggressive in reaching out to them to encourage them to vote by mail as a legal option, and that early in-person voting. We went out to all of the counties in the last few weeks before the deadline, and the lines went on for hours in some cases for our voters looking to cast their ballot using early in-person voting.
Look, I want to say, I'm glad the Republicans have finally embraced early in-person voting. We have to. Look, in 2020, we told people not to go to the polls because we were concerned about the spread of COVID. And so we were telling people not to go to the polls, only vote by mail. They were telling people to only vote at the polls. So the discrepancies and the differences were massive. Now there will be more Republicans to vote early, and there will be more Democrats to vote in person. It'll be a more normal process. There shouldn't be two different methodologies, Republicans voting one way and Democrats voting another. And I think this year's results will reflect a more even balance and more Democrats voting in person and more Republicans voting by mail. And that's a good thing because the methodology of voting shouldn't radically differ by party. And so I'm glad that the Republicans have embraced early voting, and Democrats, we are no longer telling people that they shouldn't vote. We encourage people to vote early, but we're not telling people that there's something wrong with voting at the polls, because there isn't. The pandemic was a unique situation in 2020, and that's part of why the numbers look different.
An article that was published in the Philadelphia Inquirer over the weekend noted numerous unfounded or false reports of voter fraud and intimidation, including a viral video of a man dropping off ballots as evidence of fraud, which was actually a postmaster making a delivery. Are you both confident in the security and safety of this year's election?
Well, I certainly hope so. And, right now our focus is on getting our folks out to vote, getting everybody to the polling places tomorrow, those who still have mail-in ballots, to make sure they put them down at the County Board of Elections. I think you're going to find in all elections there are a lot of claims. There was a photo or video out there on the internet showing somebody taking ballots out of a mailbox, opening them up, and the Trump ballots being ripped up. I think right now what I'm trying to say to all of the voters, Republican, Democrat, Independent, ignore the noise for the time being. Let's focus. Tomorrow is election day. Let's get those votes in for our Republican candidates. And we'll be watching, we'll be observing, which we've always been doing. The Democrats too. It's our statutory right to have watchers and observers. It's a statutory right in Pennsylvania law for well over 100 years. And that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm sure the Democrats will be too. And we're hoping for a very, safe and secure election for tomorrow for everybody.
Senator Street, would you like to comment as well?
Yeah, Pennsylvania elections are safe and secure. People should feel confident in votes and feel confident in the returns. And I'm confident that the vast majority of candidates, Republicans and Democrats, will accept the results of the elections. Republican commissioners, Democratic commissioners do a good job, county boards of election, working to count votes and get votes in. And look, almost every American politician runs this knowing you work hard, you win some, you lose some, everybody except for Donald Trump. And so hopefully he will join the rest of Democrats and Republicans in accepting the results, free and fair elections, even when he loses.
Now, before we run out of time, I want to touch upon some of the other races, particularly the statewide races that will be on the ballot tomorrow. First of all, let's talk briefly about the U.S. Senate race between incumbent Bob Casey and Republican challenger Dave McCormick. What should viewers know about this race?
Well, I'll tell you, I think Dave McCormick is absolutely positioned to win. He's been a phenomenal candidate. He's a seventh-generation Pennsylvanian. He has enormous experience and background that will benefit our state to help with jobs, national security. He's gone everywhere. He's done everything. I mean, his energy level is just amazing. Voters are responding to his message. He will be a strong finisher tomorrow, and he will retire Bob Casey.
Look, I think Bob Casey is going to be reelected. Dave McCormick is a guy who lives in Connecticut. He's a guy who has spent his career outsourcing jobs. And he is a guy. He is part of the billionaire class that has exploited Americans. Pennsylvanians want a guy who lives here, works here, and cares for them, protects them. Bob Casey has been fighting against greedflation, and while Dave McCormick has been driving it through his greedy corporate practices, Dave McCormick does not live in Pennsylvania. Maybe he had some relatives that did. He lives in a big mansion in Connecticut, flies here to do campaign stops and flies back. Bob Casey lives here, works here, knocks on doors here, talks to people here, and Bob Casey votes here. And Dave McCormick doesn't vote here, doesn't live here, owns a mansion someplace else, flies in on his fancy jets. And while Bob Casey has spent a lifetime working for regular Pennsylvanians, Dave McCormick ran the biggest hedge fund in the world and spent a lifetime driving up prices and squeezing money out of regular folks so he can make money for himself.
All
I'm
three.
sorry to say, but I think that's just a Grimm's fairy tale. I mean, Dave McCormick absolutely lives in Pennsylvania. It's Bob Casey, who's been in the Senate for over 17 years, and no one even knows what he's done. He has survived by literally almost hiding. He has not been an active proponent for the Pennsylvanians. He's been in public jobs for a long period of time, and we can't point to anything that he's done to really elevate the lives of Americans. Dave McCormick was a businessman, yes, and he created hundreds and hundreds of jobs through
in
the
other countries.
efforts and the investment of his capital. So we can move on. You can say that he lives in Connecticut, but Dave McCormick is living in Pennsylvania. He is a Pennsylvanian. It's ridiculous to say otherwise. He will be a great U.S. Senator for all Pennsylvanians, Democrat, Republican, and Independent.
Dave McCormick owns a huge mansion in Connecticut. He voted in Connecticut. He actually voted in Connecticut. Dave McCormick lives in Connecticut. He flies his jet into events in Pennsylvania, gets back on and flies back out. And his company, Dave McCormick, owned a $1 billion hedge fund that invested, created jobs overseas, moved jobs, exported Pennsylvania jobs, exported American jobs to other countries. He made his money getting rid of American jobs and sending them overseas. That's what Dave McCormick did. That's what he's done. While Bob Casey's been standing for reflation, Bob Casey's brought back millions of dollars. He's brought back money to get let out of schools. He's brought back money to make sure our roads and bridges are safer. Bob Casey has a record that we can stand on. And Dave McCormick has a record too. You guys just don't like to talk about it. His record is outsourcing jobs and squeezing money out of regular folks and flying back and forth to his mansion in Connecticut. It is a good looking mansion.
All three of the statewide row offices are on the ballot as well. Why are these important?
Well, they are key positions in our Commonwealth, and they perform very valuable functions. Stacey Garrity, who is our candidate for re-election for the treasurer, sadly, her father passed away this morning, but she's done a phenomenal job as the state treasurer. She's helped to recover and return to many citizens of Pennsylvania property that has been lost over the years. Tim DeFore, as our Auditor General up for re-election. Tim DeFore is the first Auditor General who was actually an auditor, which is something remarkable that we have to have gotten to that point. He's been phenomenal, helping communities all throughout the Commonwealth. And we have the only candidate running for Attorney General who is actually a prosecutor. You know, Dave Sunday is the district attorney in York County. He's had many years of great experience in that role. He's a great believer in redemption. He's a great believer in making sure that communities are safe from crime. He will prosecute crime. He will take and be an attorney general who will make sure we're all safe in this Commonwealth. And his opponent is just, never been a prosecutor and has had many other public jobs in the state Senate as the Auditor General. Dave Sunday is clear and far away the best candidate for Attorney General.
Look, Eugene D. Pasquale for Attorney General is the only candidate who has said he is committed to protecting a woman's right to choose and protecting women who come here fleeing the persecution from other states to get their right, to be able to exercise their rights over bodily autonomy. Look, Malcolm Kenyatta running for Auditor General is a candidate of distinction. I know him. I voted for him. Malcolm Kenyatta wants to make sure we return to doing school audits. We got an auditor general who doesn't want to do school audits, and it's crazy because we need them. We need to make sure our school kids are getting the best they can no matter where they live. And Malcolm Kenyatta will return to doing school audits. And look, I'm going to, out of deference to Stacey Garrity's death in her family, I'm just going to say, look, my condolences to her, and encourage people to vote for Aaron.
What congressional races are you targeting?
Well, we believe that we have a very good shot of picking up a state Senate seat in Philadelphia. Joe Picozzi, our candidate there, has been phenomenal. He's knocked on so many doors that I tell you, I almost can't keep up with the count of it. He has a phenomenal organization out there. I absolutely believe that is going to be a pickup for us. We're doing very well in our other state Senate seats. In the House, right now it's a one-vote split, but I am confident that we will pick up seats and take back the majority. We've been working with the House Republican Campaign Committee. We have some great opportunities to flip some seats to get us back into the majority there. We're looking forward to that on Election Day.
Senator Street, do you foresee any scenario regarding a change of control in either the House or Senate?
Look, I think we're going to build on our House majority, absolutely, and I think we've got a great chance of flipping the state Senate. It's going to be close, but we're certainly going to. If we don't flip it, we're going to narrow them. We're going to continue to narrow the margins. I think that Patty Kim is absolutely going to win a seat currently held by DeSanto, a Republican in Dauphin County. I think that Nicole Rossuto has a great chance of winning a seat held by Devlin Robinson in Allegheny. Look, Jim Works is working hard, and he's given it his all in Erie, and I think that's going to be a really close race and certainly a race to watch. If we win all three of those seats, then Austin Davis can vote us into the majority. So there's a real clear path. There are other races that could come up, but those three races are going to be nail biters. Well, Patty Kim's, I think, going to win big. The others will be nail biters, but I think we've got good shots of winning those races, and we could flip the state Senate. Something when I got to the Senate 8 years ago, where we were down 34-16, is remarkable that we're now talking about Democratic majority, possibility of Democratic majority in the state Senate.
We are one day away from Election Day. What will both of your parties do to motivate voters to go to the polls?
Well, again, and I think we're going to hold on to the Devlin Robinson and Dan Laughlin seats. What we're doing is right now, we're knocking on doors, we're calling folks, we're actually meeting with them, we're encouraging them all, get to the polls tomorrow. We've done very well at that. We usually get very high turnout to polls, and we're in full gear. We're taking nothing for granted. And we're working full tilt. I've been working since 4 this morning, and we'll probably be working round the clock until 8 o'clock tomorrow night.
Senator, you get the last word.
Look, we're working hard. We're working hard to remind Americans and Pennsylvanians that a woman's right to choose is on the ballot. We are working hard to remind Americans and Pennsylvanians that our unity and protection of democracy is on the ballot. We're reaching out to Republicans who are tired of Donald Trump's antics and his division. We are reaching out to Democrats that are fired up to protect our basic rights. We're reaching out to people that are concerned about housing and concerned about health care. We're knocking on doors. We're sending out texts, and we're having rallies. And we're going to have a great big party on the Parkway in Philadelphia when Kamala Harris comes in to welcome Philadelphians and encourage us to get out and vote.
Senator Sharif Street, chair of the state Democratic Party, and Lawrence Tabas, chair of the state Republican Party. Thank you both for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Earlier, John Neese from Weather World told us about past weather trends on Election Day.
Election Day is less than a week away, and the weather's impact on voter turnout and election results has long been a subject of speculation. Conventional political wisdom holds that inclement weather reduces voter turnout, and that's supposed to favor Republicans. But few studies have been done on the subject. One of the first was published in 1994, a paper called "Does Rain Help the Republicans?" The author looked at 3 elections in the 1980s and concluded that rain mostly deters people who weren't likely to vote anyway, Democrats and Republicans alike. But so few of those people end up voting that in the end it didn't really matter. A more comprehensive 2007 study called "The Republicans Should Pray for Rain: Whether Turnout and Voting in U.S. Presidential Elections" looked at elections for the White House from 1948 to 2000 using precipitation data from more than 20,000 locations to assess the impact of rain and snow at the county level on past election days. Here's a look at some of their results. For every 1 inch of rain above the daily average in a county, turnout decreased by about 1%. And for every 1 inch of snow above the daily average, turnout was reduced by about 0.5%. As for partisan consequences, they estimated that for every 1 inch of rain above average, the Republican candidate got an extra 2.5% of the vote. The researchers found that the weather deterred a significant number of voters in only 3 recent presidential elections. The 1972 election was so lopsided for Richard Nixon, and the 1992 election for Bill Clinton, that drier weather wouldn't have changed those outcomes. But in 2000, had Election Day been perfectly dry in Florida, Al Gore probably would have won the state, changing the Electoral College result. The obvious conclusion is, the tighter the race, the more important the weather is. A paper published just this year that focused only on the 2012, 2016, and 2020 presidential elections in North Carolina suggests that any negative effects that rain may have on Election Day's voting is partly offset by the increase in voting by other methods, such as early in-person voting and mail-in ballots. Congress chose early November for Election Day way back in 1845, when the U.S. was still mainly a rural and agricultural society. Harvesting was usually done by then, so farmers had time to vote, and winter hadn't kicked in yet, a plus in those days of horse and buggy travel. Why Tuesday? Well, farmers needed a day to get to the county seat, a day to vote, and a day to get back without interfering with the Sabbath. That left Tuesday and Wednesday, but Wednesday was market day. So Tuesday it was.
That concludes today's show. Be sure to tune in for PCN's live election night coverage. Join us for an analysis of poll results and reports from campaign headquarters. That's tomorrow night, live at 8:30. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.